Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday everybody from people within the industry to fans alike were shocked to see John Lasseter be the latest name swept up in what's going on in Hollywood right now in terms of inappropriate behavior. But the John Lasseter situation, I feel, is very unique because it exists in a gray area that I think is perhaps more relatable to more people in terms of a potential problem they could find themselves in. Because the way the story took shape was that John Lasseter was being forced to take a 6-month leave from Disney Pixar. You know, he heads up their entire animation division over there for quote-unquote unwanted hugs. And for people who just skimmed the story or only read the headline, you're doing yourself a real disservice because that is not the case. Although I do not think that John Lasseter is a predator by any means. And so I was also disappointed to see some people have a knee-jerk reaction to the news saying, how can we support any Disney animated movies, Disney animation or Pixar after this news? I think that is totally an inappropriate response. So let's talk about the situation in detail. I think the real damage done, by the way, was when Rashida Jones and Will McCormick, the big headline that started it all off and kicked it all off was that they had left Toy Story 4 after John Lasseter had made an unwanted advance on Rashida Jones. She had not commented to the Hollywood Reporter who broke the story, but she and Will McCormick did make a statement to the New York Times, and they said that it was unfortunate that in the zeal to add more names to the list, there was starting to be some irresponsible reporting, and that there was no advance, at least in this case, made towards Rashida Jones personally. And they clarified that the reason that they left Toy Story 4 was that women and people of color, their voices are not heard over at Pixar. I think that was the worst thing to come out of the story image-wise in the long run. And that's something that I think that Pixar should work to fix immediately. It's particularly unfortunate because, of course, Coco hits theaters today. And that is a film about, Mexican culture. It's a Valentine to that. Although there are 3 main people working on it behind the scenes, creatively. You have the director and you have 2 writers, and only one of those people is of Mexican descent. So that doesn't look so good either. But it's such a fabulous movie. My review's gone up today as well. I would hate to see it at all taken down because of what's happened here. I think that John Lasseter, we'll go over what he has done in a moment, but I think he's taking a 6-month leave. He seems to be genuinely mortified. I think to some degree the company let him down a little bit. Disney let him down a little bit. I think this is a problem where a number of people are at fault. So I think after the 6-month leave, if he truly changes his behavior, I think he should be fine to come back. I mean, I think that, on a side note, I have not loved his creative leadership of Disney animation, but you can't argue with his results, and I think he should have the chance to come back and prove that he has changed. I mean, if change isn't possible, that's going to be a big problem for society in a number of areas. Okay, so what did he do? Well, of course, there was the issue of unwanted hugs, but the thing is they weren't quick hugs. They were very long hugs, lingering, and whispering in people's ears. For instance, the Wall Street Journal apparently followed John Lasseter around for a day and took photos, on a side, it had nothing to do with this, but they were just so shocked that he hugged 48 people in a day that they decided to do a photo album on it. Then also he would apparently kiss women on the lips to the point where there was a move developed at Pixar and Disney animation called quote-unquote the Lasseter, where you would move your face away very quickly. He should have picked up on that. That's a real problem here, his inability or unwillingness to pick up the signals. And then apparently, like one instance that was given was that he was in a meeting and he put his hand on a female employee's knee next to him, and that's inappropriate all on its own. Even if you have a relationship with that person, it's not an appropriate thing to do in a meeting in front of even in private, but with a number of other people present. I think it diminishes that person's standing in the room. But the woman had a skirt on, and so she had a bare knee. It's just really, really bad. And on top of everything, it seems that John Lasseter has a bit of a drinking problem, and it's a shame that nobody insisted that he get help for that. And he seems genuinely, again, mortified. And I think that there's a problem in Hollywood in particular because everybody hugs in Hollywood. It's a big thing in Hollywood. And there's I think as people work more and more these days, I think the line between personal and professional lives becomes blurred, understandably, which is why it's all the more important to read body language. And also, for someone to tell you if your behavior is inappropriate and you don't realize it. And not in an accusatory way in front of everyone, but to pull that person aside. I wish someone had spoken up, or, and clearly they didn't feel they could speak up, but this behavior seems so unnatural and wrong for a business environment, and it's so across the board with apparently every woman working there, that you would think it would have been observed by someone who did have the stature in the company to approach John Lasseter privately and say, you got to work on this, John, you can't do that. And I think that, as I said, with the line being blurred between work, personal and professional lives, people do make friends at work, and romance blossoms at work. It's hard to meet people. I would hate for the takeaway from this to be everybody stay away from everybody else. And I've seen a number of people comment and say, well, guys are expected to make the first move, and that's totally true. I think that in many ways, that's just how we're conditioned in society, and that usually is the best way that relationships are started. But on the flip side of that, while men are expected to often make the first move, women are expected, I think, rightfully so, to telegraph how they feel about somebody. So be aware of body language and signals that are being sent out by the person that you either want to be more, intimate friends with or have a romance with. She, or in any, whatever the situation is, will let you know through their body language. And I tweeted about this last night. And someone said, well, what if I'm not good at reading people? Well, as someone tweeted back to that, you should really learn to read body language. It's a very important skill that will help you in a number of areas. But if you're genuinely confused, you should ask a friend, someone you trust, to observe the interaction and be like, am I imagining it? Is this cool? Do you think the person's receptive to it? Or am I creating a problem for myself? Just have them check. And if you're really nervous about it, you can ask a couple of good friends to observe it and, take a poll and see what everybody says. And if it's really difficult to figure out, again, it's on the other person, I think, in this complicated world that we live in, to make their feelings clear. And of course, you could always ask. And if you want to, I think, pursue a relationship, something personal that stems from a professional environment, I think you need to be clear about that eventually. And I think the steps for it to move forward need to happen outside of the workplace. You shouldn't be, having kind of romantic behavior in a work setting. But also, if someone's giving you mixed signals, that person's not a good person for you to be involved with, because it's not a good place. They're putting you in a vulnerable position, not only personally, but professionally, and that's just not appropriate. So I think that the John Lasseter situation could have been avoided if someone had just stepped up to the plate and said, stop kissing women on the lips at work, John. And you're giving way too many hugs, and they're too long, and people don't like them. I think he would have certainly preferred that to what he's going through now. So I'm curious, what do you think? What's your experience? What would you advise? Because again, I'm starting to see more and more people become genuinely concerned about their own behavior, because of course nobody wants to go through this. But I think that straitjacketing everybody, I don't think is good for society either. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is that the Disney juggernaut continues to roll on, and Star Wars is now on the tracking board, and it's projected to open with 200 million plus, which is very impressive because only 3 movies in history have been able to do that to date. Star Wars The Force Awakens, which opened with 248, the biggest opening of all time, followed by Jurassic World at 208.8, followed right by The Avengers at 207.4. But it's interesting to note that Age of Ultron dipped to 191, below 200. So it's hard to sustain. I think in all of those cases, you have the return or the debut of a very big brand, right? And also, of course, let's not forget that Justice League tracking ended up being horribly off. Wonder Woman tracking was off. Although the DCEU is a special case because there are so many outside factors at play and things that people just don't know until the last minute about the movie. Although we don't know if The Last Jedi will be well received. The Force Awakens certainly had a reversal of fortune the longer people mulled it over. I didn't like it. I had problems with it right from the beginning. But I think eventually more and more fans started taking off those rose-colored glasses. But we'll see what Rian Johnson does with it. However, based on the opening weekend advance sales that I've been seeing, I think that it's probably going to be in the 200 million ballpark. It could be a little bit below, but I think it'll still obviously be one of the top 10 openings of all time. I mean, Star Wars is just an ideal brand. Disney, that's why they wanted it. That's pretty much the case with all their brands, and that they mobilize the most casual of moviegoers. But Star Wars does in particular. Now, of course, it can't open like The Force Awakens all the time. Rogue One opened at 155. I think The Last Jedi, because it's a Skywalker story and there are a lot of unanswered questions, burning unanswered questions about Kylo Ren and Rey, and Mark Hamill's returning, I think it'll do better than 155. But we'll see how close it gets to the Star Wars The Force Awakens 248. It has to beat Beauty and the Beast's 174.8 to be the top opening of the year for 2017. We're at the end of the road here. The Last Jedi is the last blockbuster left for the year. So no matter what happens, Disney will probably have the top two openings of the year. We'll just see what's on top, Beauty and the Beast or Star Wars The Last Jedi. They're crazy to give up the Christmas spot in 2018. They're putting Solo as a Memorial Day weekend release. We'll talk about Solo actually at the end of this video as well, interestingly enough. But at least they're going back to the holiday season for 2019. Filling the space in 2018, the holiday season, is the animated Spider-Man movie, Miles Morales, Aquaman, which I feel is a summer movie, so I think it's a mistake to release it then, and then also Bumblebee, the solo Transformers film, which I also have to tell you I think is a summer movie. But then Mary Poppins Returns, Disney is still in the space. This is probably why they moved Han Solo. Mary Poppins Returns opens for Christmas itself, and Disney, of course, is hoping for big things for that. That is a good release date for Mary Poppins. All right, so let's get to the two viewer questions of the day. It's right before Thanksgiving, so the news cycle is a little slow, so I picked two viewer questions from you guys, and naturally there are a lot about the DCEU because, we've been talking about that a lot lately. So Super Shanko says, question! In light of recent stuff with Warner Brothers, do you think they're using the Harley Quinn series as a testing ground for the Harley Quinn movie? Seeing how the response for this is sure to make Gotham City Sirens and the Joker and Harley movie viable options going forward. That's an interesting question. I do not agree, though. I wish that they were that on the ball and floating out creative stuff, but I just don't think that's the case. I think that all the movies that are to feature Harley Quinn are a long ways off. In fact, not one of them has a release date. Suicide Squad 2 as well. So I think that Warner Brothers and the DCEU want to keep the character in the public eye, thus wanting Margot Robbie to voice the character in the animated series, which is very unusual. They almost never do that because they're going to have to pay her a lot to do that. So I think they just want to keep that character in play and with Margot Robbie being associated with the role. So that's what I think it is. And also, I'm not too worried about actually the Harley Quinn movies because I think that for the most part, with the exception of David Ayer on Gotham City Sirens, they have good creative people match with the material. I think Glenn Ficarra and John Requa are fantastic for the Joker and Harley movie. And as for Gavin O'Connor on Suicide Squad 2, sometimes I haven't loved his portrayal of female characters, but he did direct Jane Got a Gun for Natalie Portman. He came in late on that. But the movie that made him was Tumbleweeds, which is about two women, a mother and daughter. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on that as well. So I'm not too worried about Harley Quinn. I think, again, it's just keeping her on people's radar and not having her go away for too long. And also, with Margot Robbie just doing the voiceover, that's a small commitment, which she'll, again, get paid a lot for, but she can record all her dialogue like in a weekend. All right, so, and then continue with her very busy schedule these days in live action. Then for the last viewer question, this is actually a tandem. This is two together. So Carla Lopez first asked, "Hi Grace, question. You mentioned that Justice League had a lot of flops with the VFX and the CGI, with the Henry Cavill mustache and some fight scenes. I just thought the mustache was a problem. I thought for the most part the VFX looked good, but a lot of people did not. Do you think the Justice League would have been in better shape if they delayed the theatrical release and given a chance for the editing team to make everything look smooth? I really enjoyed the movie, but I noticed these things. Squeak, squeak. Thanks for the amazing content on YouTube. I really love your videos. Greetings from Puerto Rico." Carla, I hope everything is okay in Puerto Rico and you and your loved ones are doing well down there. But then Monica Ribeiro, I think that her question adds to that, and she said, "Hi Grace, viewer question. Do you think it is possible that so much information about the production and behind the scenes of a movie is ruining some people's judgment when they watch them? Justice League is an example. When I went to see the movie, I heard many people complaining and looking for flaws. Do you think studios need to rethink their marketing strategies and stop releasing so much information that they might eventually spoil the movie? Love your videos. Greetings from Portugal." Oh, I love it. Such a worldly morning movie news, as always. I love talking to everyone across the globe about movies. I think that I wouldn't stop talking about behind-the-scenes stuff with movies because that's what the business is these days. People are very eager to discuss these films and they want to know about them far in advance. And I think for the most part, it's not a problem. But I think that the problem is in particular with the DCEU. Now, as for the mustache situation, I think a lot of people wouldn't have noticed it, as you know, Carla's talking about that in particular, if the story hadn't been so well publicized that they had to remove it in the first place. I think some people would have noticed it. In some scenes, it was super noticeable, but maybe not. It wouldn't be as big a deal as it became. I don't think it's even still that big a deal. I think it's just the real story there is that Paramount's a jerk, that they wouldn't let him just put on a fake mustache, or as I've seen some people discuss, they wouldn't have just let the Warner Brothers foot the bill for adding a mustache digitally to the Mission Impossible movie, because that's a lot easier to do. Ridiculous, super petty. I think maybe in the future for contracts, it probably never happen to Warner Brothers again. They'll be careful. They'll say, if we need you to shave any facial hair or change anything that you've done for another role, our movie gets precedence. But I think that the problem with the DCEU in terms of showing a lot of stuff in advance is that they keep not using all of it. That's the big problem. There's so much missing footage from the trailers and behind the scenes photos, and then the movie is pieced together so obviously that naturally the audience wants to try and put it together a different way. They're like, I don't like the way this turned out. Let me see if I can rejigger it, right? I know there's a lot of material I can use. And you even had the cinematographer coming out for Justice League saying, I would love to see a director's cut of this movie because a lot of the stuff I shot isn't in it. That's a shame. And I think that while this is mostly happening to the DCEU, I suspect that it will happen to Han Solo as well, because that movie had a similar situation where it switched directors late in the game and they're piecing together the movie. I mean, we'll see what kind of a patch job Star Wars does, but I think that they are in the same, at least in the very same danger zone. I just think that Hollywood overall has to have better discipline in the pre-production stage. They can't keep making movies like this. It's just downright unprofessional. There shouldn't be so much footage on the cutting room floor. And because things are largely shot digitally these days, it's cheaper to shoot a lot of footage and reshoot it. And I think that's hurting the industry, especially when it comes to blockbusters. Also, rushing to meet release dates. I don't think scripts are in the best shape they can be going in, and you can't fix a script on the fly. You shouldn't be moving forward to production until everything is locked in a very satisfactory manner in pre-production. That's the way it's supposed to go. I don't understand. You're not even actually supposed to go into pre-production until the script is locked in development. So I don't even, this is something that Hollywood should definitely remember. They should put it on big signs on the walls. Just like loose lips sink ships, starships. They should be like, if crappy scripts can't be hidden. All right, so that's what I think the problem is, but I appreciate everybody's question today. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think today's top 2 stories, the viewer questions, anything you'd like to see covered next week, and of course any questions that you might have. And I hope that everybody here in the United States has a fabulous Thanksgiving.